Hello everyone, this is Caleb Simpson, and you are watching my walkthrough for The Legend of Zelda, Breath of the Wild for Nintendo Wii U and Switch. Now this game is absolutely massive, both in terms of the sheer size of the world that we have to explore, as well as the number of items that we can collect, and it can be kind of tricky just even keeping track of them all and figuring out where we've gone and where we haven't and stuff. It's a little bit intimidating. So, this is an open world adventure game, meaning that you can go anywhere and do anything. You just pick a direction and you just start walking and you experience a whole bunch of cool things. It's all about just exploring and having an adventure. That's what this whole thing's about. It's not very linear at all, so it is a little bit of a weird thing to try and make a walkthrough for it. Like this, this is what you should do. It doesn't really work that way. That formula does not fit this game at all. So, that all being said, but you're here and you're watching this video. But that all being said, what I want to provide for you guys, just to give you kind of my dream here, is there is a lot of things early on, especially, that will prevent you from progressing in certain areas of the game until you unlock them. And so, what I want to do for you is, especially early on, is I want to get you access to those things as soon as possible so that you can teleport around the map, so that you have all the equipment you need and all the tools necessary to cook really awesome dishes, etc., and teach you how to do all those things so that I give you the tools you need to enjoy this game to the fullest. Now, in whatever playstyle that means for you, whether you want to do stealth gameplay, whether you want to just run in guns blazing, whether you want to go straight for the bosses and just have a challenge, or you want to slow down a little bit and get a bunch of optional collectibles first to make your character stronger, whatever your playstyle you prefer, I want to give you the tools you need to do so that you can enjoy this game to the fullest, and that is what I'm here to do. So in a lot of ways, this walkthrough is going to be more of a bird's eye view to Breath of the Wild, and at the same time it'll also go super in-depth to other particular details. And the reason for this is because I feel like some things are pretty self-explanatory. Like, I'll show a lot of the Koroks at first, and then I won't talk about them at all, and I'll just kind of fast forward through them, because honestly, once you've seen one rock placement puzzle for a Korok, you've kind of seen them all. So that being said, the stuff that's pretty self-explanatory or that I've already explained, I'll kind of fast forward through those things and give a brief description as things are happening. But for other things, I will actually slow it down or even show multiple methods for how to complete a particular puzzle. And that's because I want to provide options for you guys, so I'm not just limiting you to one way to do things. I want to provide as many options as possible and really give you the opportunity to enjoy this game to the fullest, or even just experience this game again if you're playing through for a second playthrough, to experience it in a new way that you hadn't considered before. So that all being said, this is not going to be a 100% walkthrough in the sense of me collecting everything. I'm not going to be completing the entire compendium, but I will explain how to do so. I'm not going to get all 900 Korok seeds. I'll show some of the easier ones, but more so what I'm interested in is showing the hardest, the 20 or 30 hardest Korok seeds in the game, and I'll show multiple ways to do them and explain them in great detail, because those are the trickiest ones. They're probably the ones you'll struggle with the most. So that's the kind of stuff that I'm going to focus on to really get you past the humps that I anticipate you running into, so you can really enjoy this game. So run forward, open your first two chests to get the well-worn trousers and the old shirt. You can equip them by pressing plus on your controller and then equipping them, and this will give you a little bit of armor, which reduces incoming damage. Now what you're seeing on screen is the fact that I'm showing a checklist in the background. This is an item tracker, and there's a bunch of different ones like this you can find online. That would be what you search for in Google. Just search item tracker or interactive map, and you can find a bunch of tools that you can use for Breath of the Wild to keep track of stuff. So that's a tool as an example that you can use to help you throughout the game. And as a comment about that, as far as pros and cons, you can use online websites, but the problem is that your information can get lost unless you have a specific login. But usually those kind of things, if your cookies get deleted, like a antivirus program, for example, removes your cookies, then it will remove all your progress. So you could lose all your stuff, and that's annoying. Otherwise, what I just showed actually was a Google Doc. I found it on a Reddit post, and then I just clicked it and it added it to my Google Drive. Google Drive is free, by the way. You just need to you can sign up with any email. It doesn't matter. You don't have to use a Google email. So anyways, that's just another way that too, then it's on my phone, and that's on my cloud, so I can just use my computer or my phone and check things off, and it's great. Those are examples of tools you can use to help you throughout this game. I'm not personally going to be providing links to those websites myself, because those websites will probably change over time anyway, but now you know what to search for. So item trackers, interactive maps. So once the voice is done speaking, we have this subtle tutorial explaining how to jump and climb, which is a feature we're going to be using a lot in Breath of the Wild. Trust me. You want to run forward, and then while running at the wall, by holding forward with the analog stick, you want to press the X button to jump. When Link jumps at a wall, he will automatically climb on. At that point, you need to use the analog stick to climb in the direction you wish. So in this case, you want to hold the analog stick up so that Link will climb up. After that, you want to run out of the cave, and then we'll have this short cinematic of Link running forward to the edge of this plateau overlooking the land of Hyrule. And yes, it's huge. There's a lot of distance over there, and yes, everything you can see, you can go to. We are not even seeing the entirety of Hyrule from here at all. There's actually a whole bunch more stuff. In fact, there's probably 6 times the amount of area that you're seeing right here in the entire world of Hyrule in Breath of the Wild, which is crazy. That size might intimidate you or excite you, or both, which is probably a pretty healthy reaction, honestly. Next, the camera will pan over and you'll see the short cinematic showing the old man in the distance. Now, this is a little hint that that's where we need to go next. However, this game is pretty, broad. You can kind of go wherever you want, honestly. A lot of things are optional, including talking to that old man, so you can go there if you wish, but you are not required to. Alright, there's a lot of stuff you can collect in Breath of the Wild, and most things that are collectible will actually sparkle. They have this little, shing, light thing going on them, so that's how you know they're collectible. Not everything does that, such as these bladed rhino beetles. They're collectible as well, but they don't have the little shimmer. Anyways, anything you collect, you will then see it pop up on the screen with a little tooltip that says take, and then with the A button, so you just want to mash the A button. So usually what you can do is you can just kind of run around and be mashing the A button, and you'll collect all the things. So that's a good thing for you to do. Now, for example, these bladed rhino beetles do not sparkle, but they are definitely collectible. Now, in order to get to them, though, you can't make a lot of noise. Now, the deal is you just basically have to move really, really slow. You can actually just use the analog stick and just, very slowly walk towards them. However, you make a lot less noise when you're sneaking. In order to sneak and duck down like that, all you have to do is click in the left analog stick. Now, how that works is, so the left analog stick on your controller, you just want to press it in with your thumb, and you'll hear it click. And when it does so, you will toggle back and forth between walking and ducking. So you want to make sure you duck, and then that way you can get up to these bugs without scaring them off. Up ahead, there is a tree full of apples. However, climbing is kind of awkward, especially the top one is really hard to reach. I think it's way easier to just climb on top of the nearby ledge and grab the apple directly. Do so by jumping at the tree and grabbing the apple in midair by mashing the A button. So you jump while holding forward on the analog stick and press the A button to collect it. Near the campfire, there is also a baked apple, which you should collect as well with A, and the old man will yell at you for doing so. He's just kidding, though. He's just messing with you, but you can totally talk with him, and he will give you some tips on how to play. In a lot of different Zelda games, there is an old man or old woman who gives you some tips early on, and this game is no exception. I think this one was handled pretty well. This he feels pretty organic, kind of. He's just here. It's a little bit weird that he kind of pops out of nowhere all over the place over this Great Plateau, but the way that he talks and stuff is rather amusing, and I find it funny, kind of the banter going back and forth, I guess. His dialogue options are humorous. Anyways, he tells you to go on towards the temple in the distance, which is kind of a really iconic landmark, so you're probably going to head there anyways. Anyway, one of the other interesting things that he points out, though, is he says that you can burn apples to bake them in fire. So what you want to do is you want to press the plus button to pull up your menu, then move over to the Materials tab, and then select an apple, and then select Hold. What this will do is it will allow you to hold it in your hand, and then when you get out of the menu by pressing plus again, you can then drop the apple wherever you want. You want to walk over to the fire, drop the apple in the fire, and wait for it to burn for a little bit, in which case it will turn into a baked apple. This will increase the amount of health it restores by a quarter heart, as opposed to regular apples, which only restore half a heart. Before you leave, you definitely want to grab the torch that is behind the old man. This is a pretty good weapon early on, and honestly has way more durability than the wooden sticks we've been grabbing so far. And you can talk with the old man, and his responses are rather humorous. He also gives you a quick tip that you can target enemies and objects and people by using L2 on your controller. So it's going to be your middle finger on your left hand, and that allows you to target people. So while holding it, you will remain targeted on people, which changes your camera perspective and also changes combat slightly. It's very useful, so be sure to get used to holding that whenever you're in combat. So next you want to run forward and grab the woodcutter's axe, and there is also a weapon off to the right where you can grab this rusty weapon. Along the way, you can jump into this circle of lily pads that's in the water, and this will create a Korok. So whenever you see circles like this in the water, you want to jump into it to create Koroks. And we can't actually do anything with the Koroks at the moment. What they're doing is they're giving us seeds, which is a currency that we will be able to spend on upgrades later. I would highly encourage you to get Koroks, especially early on. I would say, honestly, to be at least not super painful, you should get at least 50 Korok seeds total in the game, at least. You definitely don't have to get all 900 or anything, but if you just get some of them, it will help you a lot. So I would highly encourage you to get Korok seeds, which is basically anything in the overworld that looks kind of suspicious, like that. You see a circle of leaves, what would happen if I jump into it? Or you see a circle of rocks, what would happen if I fix the circle of rocks? What would happen if I move this little block over? Just stuff like that. If it looks like there's a little puzzle, you should try to complete it, and you'll get a Korok seed, which gives you upgrades. So don't drown in water, by the way. If you run out of stamina while you're in water, it's a bad time. So before you get too far, whether you're getting towards the temple or not, then that female voice will call out to you again, and she will tell you to not head towards the temple, but instead go towards this beacon that she places on your map. And the correct solution in this case is to follow her advice. So we don't actually need to go to the temple at all. It's totally optional at this point. So you can go there if you want to, but we don't have to. Instead, you want to follow her advice. So up ahead we have our first enemy encounters, and these are red bokoblins, which are the easiest enemies in the game to defeat. Now you can run right past them, you can throw things at them, you can sneak up on them. However, I would highly recommend you just take these guys head on to get used to combat in Breath of the Wild. Again, these are the easiest guys in the game, so you really should get like some training in on these easy guys, because later on you're going to have much more difficult enemies to defeat, so it'd be good to train on these guns. After you smack them a couple times with weapons, they'll often fall down, and half the time they'll even drop their weapon when they do so. If you can run over fast enough, you can actually pick up their weapon so that you can take it away from them before they can get it back, which is actually pretty cool. This particular one dropped a Boko Club, which does 4 damage, which is double what our wooden stick did, which is awesome. Continuing onwards, there is another Bokoblin up ahead, and one other tactic you can use is hold down the L button to target the enemy, and while doing this, you can then use the jump button to jump around. So in this case, I used a backflip, didn't time it well. This next one I timed perfectly, though. You hold to the right, and then use the jump button, and this will allow you to side jump. Now, if you do the timing well, right before an enemy attacks, you will then activate a Flurry Rush, which allows you to smack enemies a whole bunch. Anyways, you want to keep getting used to using this method because backflips and side jumps are very useful against enemies, and they can be very, very powerful. After defeating the Bokoblin, be sure to open the nearby chest. This particular one has the Hylian Trousers, which increases our armor to 3. You want to press plus, go to your equipment screen, and then equip the Hylian Trousers to increase your total armor count to 4. What that will do is it will reduce all incoming damage by up to an entire heart, which is very powerful, actually. So back there a little bit ago, you saw me smacking the nearby barrel, and that was because I was trying to break it open and show that there's goodies inside. However, I quickly decided that it was not worth the durability cost, so I abandoned that plan because I wanted to hang on to my precious, precious Boko Club. And now, up ahead there is an enemy. I could have brought one of those barrels with me instead and thrown it at this enemy. Instead, I'm going to show these jars here. Now, both barrels and jars contain goodies. They can occasionally have arrows and some other goodies, and you throw them by pressing the R button. So aim towards the enemy. They do, like, have a very predictable trajectory, though, so, like, you have to kind of aim it well. I'm not even really sure. That jar totally flew through that enemy. I don't understand why. But also just check after throwing jars to see if they do drop goodies, that you pick up whatever they drop. So just kind of check the barrels and jars to make sure if you do throw them like that, be sure to check what they drop, such as this barrel up ahead, which drops arrows. So you want to pick up this bundle of arrows, and that is a very good thing. So this is that temple that the old man was pointing out, and as I was saying earlier, it's optional to come here. The reason I did this is because I wanted this traveler's bow and that bundle of arrows is why I did this. Just so we had some projectiles as options before we continued on too much further. The traveler's bow is just a little bit nicer than the Boko bows that are found on the Great Plateau, so I just wanted to make sure that I got these two weapons pretty early on. I mean, the Hylian Trousers and this Traveler's Bow are pretty close together, so I figured I'd grab these before I continue on towards the beacon. So if you get hurt during any of this time, you can totally heal by pulling up the plus menu and then going to either your cooked meals, in this case that's baked apples, or going to your materials and you can eat something in there. In this case that would be regular apples or the Hylian shrooms. You can cook all that stuff too by throwing it in the fire. However, it's better to wait until we have a cooking pot because you can get even more benefit out of it, and I'll explain what I mean by that soon. Up ahead, there's some enemies along the way, and I didn't realize that there was an explosive barrel nearby. So this enemy totally went and grabbed it and threw it at me, which was a big mistake. I was groaning to myself as I did this. I don't know why I didn't even see that. You can see it right there, just to the left of the screen. There's this explosive barrel. Boom! Now, the problem with setting stuff on fire like this is it will burn up your weapons and stuff, too. So I was worried about these enemies, too. That Boko Club, I was trying to defeat him as soon as possible because that Boko Club is on fire. I managed to grab it in time, though. But the good thing about coming here is you can get some seared steak, which I had to use to heal from going here and hurting myself, so I didn't actually gain anything, which is great. I guess I got a Boko Club, though, so there's that. Up ahead, you'll notice that there's a bunch of arrows that are plucked into the ground, and so you want to collect these by pressing A on them, and these are great. This is super valuable early on. And an interesting thing to note about this is these enemies will actually notice that they actually have bows, and one of the things you can do with that is if you watch them, in fact, when I'm walking towards this enemy right here, you'll see arrows plucking into the ground nearby off to the right side of the screen, and I can walk over, like right there, off to the right, there is an arrow, and I can run over and grab it real quick to get even more arrows. You can actually taunt enemies into shooting at you and just kind of weave back and forth and go and run in circles for a little bit when there's archers nearby, and you can get them to keep shooting arrows into the ground so that you can collect them. If you time it well, it's actually not that hard at all, but just so you know, most enemies like this that have regular arrows anyways, you can collect up to 10 arrows per enemy. After that, they'll stop plucking into the ground. They'll shoot the arrows, but they just instantly disappear, so you don't actually have the opportunity to collect them after you've collected enough. But anyways, you can run back and forth there and get 20 arrows from those guys, then run away until you can't see them anymore, run back again, and now they have respawned, and you can have another 10 arrows you can get from them, which is awesome. So early game arrows can be kind of a pain to get. Like, we saw those jars earlier that had 5 arrows in it, but those will take a while to respawn once a blood moon happens. That doesn't even happen yet at this point in the game, but if you wait for a blood moon, more arrows will appear. But a lot of chests, for example, are a one-time thing. So you open a chest, gives you arrows, you'll never be able to open that chest ever again. So a lot of arrows, you pretty much have to either buy them or get them from enemies. This is the most reliable way to do it. So if you want to get a lot of arrows early on, honestly, you can do that right here on the Great Plateau, and that's a pretty good place to do it. Those enemies are really weak, they don't do a lot of damage, and you can collect, you collect all 20 that they spawn with, and then once they stop appearing, then you run away, and then come back to reset those enemies, and then collect another 20, and just keep doing that for a while, and pretty soon you have, 200 arrows or something if you want to. So you can start off your adventure actually with a lot of arrows, with just a little bit of farming. It's great. So regardless of if you decided to farm for arrows or not, you want to head towards the beacon on our map, and then you'll find a pedestal there. You want to use your Sheikah Slate on it by just walking up to it and pressing A, and this will then activate the tower. It will also rise all the other towers in Hyrule up out of the ground, so you can see them in the distance, and you can travel to each one of these to unlock a portion of our map. So this first one unlocks the map of the Great Plateau, which is actually very useful, and that was our first objective here in order to progress with the main story.
Try to remember. You have been asleep for the past 100 years. The beast. When the beast regains its true power, this world will face its end. Now then, you must hurry, Link. Before it's too late.
Alright, so next we need to climb down the tower, and you don't actually have to climb, you can actually just drop down, although if you fall from too far, you will of course take damage and you could kill yourself. So what we want to do is you want to hop down to each one of these platforms and steadily work your way down. You just circle around, pretty easy. One thing that's kind of cool here is it's actually a great example of getting used to using the right analog stick, which is I actually believe the point of this tower actually is to make you think about that. Anyways, if you use the right analog stick, you can rotate your camera. So you want to steadily rotate it to the right, and then meanwhile you can just hold forward on the left analog stick and just keep running forward the entire time. And as a result, forward will always be the direction that you're adjusting your camera. I would recommend that you get used to using the right analog stick because it will become very handy later on. It doesn't really matter too much right now, but it's good to get in the habit of using it so that you can build that muscle memory for later in the game. So once you've descended the tower, you'll have this forced conversation with the old man in which he asks about the voice you've been hearing just a little bit ago, and you can answer however you like for that. But otherwise, then he will point out the castle in the distance, which is what the voice was talking about, and that is Hyrule Castle, which is the final destination of the game, and is also where we fight the last boss. That is a little bit of a challenge, and once you get off the Great Plateau, you can actually just immediately go there and fight the final boss, although, just as a comment, it is fairly difficult. It's a pretty tough fight, especially right now. You're probably going to want to power up a little bit at least before you attempt that. That's also the end of the game. I mean, why would you do that? Why would you buy a big exploration game and go there right away, you know? Anyways, so you can do whatever you like once you get to that point. He will also then say that it's not possible to leave the Great Plateau right now, because if you do, there's steep cliffs, etc., you'll fall down to your death. That actually isn't entirely true, because using glitches and stuff, you can actually get off the Great Plateau. However, there is actually in place like a wall of death. Like, if you get down there, if you travel too far, you'll actually fall through the floor of the world, and then you'll appear back on the Great Plateau. So the developers have little methods in place to prevent you from leaving, even if you do try to glitch out of the game. So it's almost like, so weird, it's almost like they're trying to keep us here until we get through the tutorial. Nah, that couldn't be it. Anyways, the old man will then point out the shrine in the distance, so he asks you to follow him. You don't actually have to. You can just walk away and continue on with the quest and go straight to the shrine, even though he hasn't really talked super thoroughly about it yet. But he asks you to follow him up this little incline, and once you do, and then speak with him, he will point out the shrine and say that he wants you to grab a treasure from there, and if you do, he will then give you the paraglider so that you can leave the Great Plateau. So that is our next objective. You want to head over there, and that ends this conversation. Also, just a little bit ago, it had a little prompt on our screen saying that you can check out your quest status by pressing the plus button on your controller and then going over to the adventure log. So that's something you can do as well. So we now have our first official quest in which we are trying to complete this shrine on the Great Plateau. Straight ahead, there is a pool that has a bunch of Hyrule bass. There's two ways to get them. You can shoot them with arrows, actually, and then collect the arrows after you've shot them, actually, so you don't actually waste anything. You just waste durability on your bow, I suppose. But otherwise, you can shoot them with arrows if you want. Otherwise, you can just hop in the water and swim over to them and keep mashing A to collect them. The fish might, like, dive down into deeper water, but if you get away from them for a little bit, they'll come back to the shallow water again eventually, and then you can collect them. So, do whatever you want there. I would recommend you grab at least one fish because we need it for an upcoming quest, and that'll make sense here in a little while. Up ahead, there is some Bokoblin in this encampment. You don't have to fight it, but if you do, you can get some goodies. Now, by the way, whenever you see Bokoblin encampments like this, they usually have these skull chests, which you can see in the distance on top of that platform. Now, skull chests will be unlocked once you have defeated all of the enemies. And what I'm doing right now is I'm trying to headshot some Bokoblins. If you do successfully shoot them in the head with an arrow, then you will get a guaranteed critical strike, which will do a pretty decent amount of damage to these guys. And by the way, the damage of your arrows is based off of what type of arrow you're using, as well as what type of bow. I find it hilarious that this Bokoblin just threw a rock and killed the other one because he just walked right into it. It's great. So at this point, a little prompt popped up on screen, which is talking about how to use the D-pad. Now, that's short for directional pad, by the way. It looks like a plus on your controller. If you press left, then it will pull up a menu while you're holding it anyways, and you can move back and forth to select different shields. If you hold right, it will then bring up melee weapons, which is close-range ones, like swords and clubs and stuff. And then up will change your abilities, which we don't have access to. However, you can also change your bows. So you press R so that you're currently holding the bow in your hand. Then while holding it, you can press left on the D-pad to switch your arrow type, or right to switch which bow you're using. So it is a little bit convoluted because there's like multiple layers of which items you're currently selecting, but that is a way that you can change your arrow type as well. So you don't have to pull out the menus to switch to different elemental arrows and such. So once you've defeated all of the enemies in an encampment, then the skull chest will be unlocked. Now in this particular case, I was actually full on weapons, which you get used to that. That happens a lot in this game as well. So you're going to have to make room for the weapons that are better. In this case, I saw that as a Traveler Sword is definitely more valuable than the Tree Branch. So went to plus, went to my melee weapons, dropped the Tree Branch, and then I can have access to the Traveler Sword. Now, this Traveler Sword does 5 damage rather than 2, so it's definitely an upgrade. However, it's not just an upgrade as far as damage, but also in durability. The Traveler Sword can hit enemies like 12 times or more at least. Meanwhile, the Tree Branch can only hit enemies like 2 or 3 times, not very many times at all, or 4, something. Whatever, the durability on the Traveler Sword is way higher. By the way, whenever you're running around, if you see these like ruins of guardians like this, you can run past them and collect things from them as well. So most of these have screws. Occasionally they will also give you gears, which is a little bit more valuable. But yeah, just go ahead and collect the stuff from them in passing as long as you're walking by. One of the things you want to keep an eye out for, too, is these Summerwing butterflies. We're going to need at least one up ahead for an elixir that we're going to craft, and you may as well grab at least more than one if you can. Now, you'll notice this one is really high, so I can't quite reach it. I'm using my camera angle just to see how much taller it is than me. One thing I can do, actually, is I am ducking right now, but I could, like, stand underneath them and then toggle back and forth between ducking so I'm standing, but don't move so I don't make any noise, and then I can press A to collect them, and then duck back down again. So that's one trick you can do if they're flying overhead like that, so that you can sneak up on them but still be a little bit closer. Just be warned if you jump at them, so if I pressed the X button at all, it would have scared it away. So on the main menu of Breath of the Wild, you can purchase the DLC for this game, and it unlocks a whole bunch of different things, including chests like this that have the big old EX on it. So if you do not have the DLC, you will not see this chest, but all the DLC stuff is totally optional. You don't have to do it at all. It's just extra stuff. So this particular chest is an example of that, although I think it's a terrible example of what the DLC offers. You get a whole bunch of new shrines, tons of them actually, a new boss, a new dungeon, a whole bunch of new quests, some of which are very hard and also really, really epic. It's definitely like hardcore, like, you know, you've already mastered the game and now it's time to move on to something even more challenging. But it's good. It was like really fun, and it was a lot of gameplay, actually, a lot of hours. Now, I have purchased DLC for various games over the years, and generally speaking, I feel like I don't really get much value out of it, or like the ratio of game time and enjoyment versus the amount of money I'm spending on it. I feel like overall it's a better investment to just buy more games, I guess. You know what I mean? The money I spent on DLC, I could have spent on something else, I guess. So I kind of hesitate to recommend DLC in general. But, you know, as always, though, if you like the developer and you like the content they make and you want to support them, by all means, buy DLC, buy skins, all that kind of stuff. Like, more power to you. That all being said, I will say, just as a comment, like, I'm pretty frugal and I usually don't spend a lot of money on such things. I will say that of all the DLC and various games that I've played, Breath of the Wild has the best DLC, hands down, I have ever played. So just as a comment, the DLC for this game is awesome, which I think means a lot coming from me. Anyways, you want to step forward, talk to the pedestal. This will unlock a new ability called Magnesis, which you can activate by pressing the L button on L1 with your left hand with your pointing finger. Anyways, you want to move the giant doorway, the giant flat tile right there using Magnesis, and then you want to head through, and then there's another block over here. There's 2 blocks. There's one inside this wall of regular blocks, and there's also another one nearby. Grab either one of them, and you can use Magnesis to push and pull and stuff like that and move things out of the way. So you do this by just moving around with both analog sticks to move it around, and also by lifting and lowering your controller itself. So here I'm using it as a shield to get close, and then by the way, whenever you get in the way of the line of sight of enemies, it cancels their ranged attack animations. So what's happening is this Guardian Scout was constantly charging up a ranged attack over and over again. And what I was doing is I was interrupting its animation by getting the block in the way again. Anyways, you can smash it with the metal block, and this will totally destroy it really easily, so it's great. Next, you want to go ahead and move ahead and then grab this other larger plate and then grab it and use it to get to the other side to create a bridge on this side as well. Now from here, there is actually one goodie. In all these shrines, there's usually a couple enemies, a couple different puzzles you have to do. Then there's an optional puzzle. The puzzle for this particular shrine is just the fact that there is another chest up on this upper ledge. This one is metal, so you can activate it using Magnesis and pull it down so you can grab the goodies inside, which is another Traveler's Bow, which is actually awesome. The Boko bows on this plateau are not worth very much. Next, you want to use Magnesis on the metal doors to pull them open. So you want to do is pull it towards you, or you can just walk backwards while you're magnesising it, and that will magnesising? Is that even a word? Magnetizing it. I don't know what you'd even say. Magnetizing it. And then pull it backwards, and then you can go forward. This is our first shrine. I'm going to watch this cinematic the first time. After this, all the other shrines are kind of the same. As a comment, all the old dudes inside each shrine had different poses. I think they recycle some of them, but honestly, there's tons of shrines. There's a total of like 100 regular shrines and then like another 16 or whatever it is for the DLC. And the dudes inside have different poses for each one. So I think they recycle them occasionally, but most of them are all unique. So just one comment about that is one of the differences. But the rest of them, the only thing they say that's different basically is their name. The name of the shrine, by the way, is the name of the dude, just so you know. I feel like I should talk about that Guardian Scout a little bit more, because I killed it really fast. Magnesis is super strong. Smacking things with Magnesis is very powerful. It's honestly one of the most powerful weapons in the entire game, in my opinion. And I'll show more tricks with that later. But one other fun fact you can do with the Guardian Scouts is it takes them a little bit to charge up. They look at you, and they start charging up their range attack. Pew, and then they shoot. But what you can do is if you get out of their line of sight, so you hide behind something, then they can't see you anymore, and their attack has to restart and recharge up again. So what you can do is if you find that intimidating of like flinging the block around like I was doing, if that seems intimidating and you can't quite do it because you're not used to the controls yet, you should totally just grab a metal block and bring it into that room with you, and then just use it as a pillar to like hide behind. So you run forward, smack the enemy, go hide behind the block, and that will reset its attack animation. In that way, you just keep like running circles around this block and smacking it every once in a while, and the enemy will never be able to hit you. So that is the easiest version of the Guardian Scout that we will find, and so that particular one isn't too bad. It shouldn't cause you too much trouble, but if you do find it intimidating, like it's just freaking you out because it just moves so fast and it comes up to you and it's shooting lasers and you're like, ah! And so what I'd recommend you do, if that's your experience, then I would highly recommend that you save and load and defeat it a couple times to get used to it, and like get used to how long it takes before it actually fires and stuff, for example, so you can kind of get a feel for it. If you just run forward and kamikaze, just like smack it a whole bunch, you will probably actually prevent it from attacking at all because it will get stunned before it can actually get a shot off, so don't worry about it too much. Also, another fun fact too, another method for defeating it is you can totally use a block to just push it into the water. Guardian Scouts will blow up instantly if they come in contact with water, so push it into the water, it'll blow up, you can then hop in the water, grab all of these screws and stuff that it drops, and then climb up the nearby ladder to get back on land. It's really dumb. It's so powerful. So water's amazing against Guardian Scouts if you have the opportunity. So back outside, the old man has apparently tricked us. No! Instead of just one shrine being complete in order to get the paraglider, we need to actually complete 4 of them. The Fiend. So he recommends that we go to a high place so that we can look around and figure out where the remaining shrines are on the Great Plateau. The old man goes on to say that you can warp to any blue icons that you've unlocked so far. This includes towers and shrines. Once you've been to a tower or shrine the first time, you can then warp there whenever you like, using the powers of the Sheikah Slate, which is awesome. You know, guys, I don't usually, upgrade my phone too often because it's kind of expensive and stuff. You know, the new features don't really matter too much, but I will say, I need myself a Sheikah Slate, am I right? So if you wandered around and weren't sure what to do next, you can speak with the old man who will be here, and he will tell you where to go next. This is a more direct clue, even though he was kind of being vague about it a little bit ago. I'm assuming this is in case people set down the game or they still weren't sure what to do. There's a lot of little dialogue like this in video games that a lot of people just don't see. But anyways, he's telling you to go to the tower. Now you can totally climb up there if you want to, although what they're intending you to do is to warp there. Now, as a quick comment, this is entirely optional. You don't actually have to ascend the tower at all if you know where to go, but you can if you like just to make these pins, which I'm going to do in a moment. Anyways, press minus on your controller, then select the tower and warp to it. Once you get there, you'll see that the old man has actually beat you here somehow, and he won't talk about it though, and he says he's going to keep his secrets. He does have a tip for you, though. He wants you to use your scope, and you can do this by pressing in on the right analog stick. This allows you to zoom in, and then you can press the A button to place pins, which will then be placed upon your map, which is actually pretty sweet. Just another alternative to placing pins that, in case you're trying to reach something that you're looking at. So you can pin places of interest at a far distance, which is most useful when you're on top of towers like this. So you want to mark the various shrines that are here on the Great Plateau. Here I kind of couldn't quite figure out where the other shrine is. There you can see it in the distance. So there's one off to the left, there's one on top of this mountain on the side there, and there's one over in the snowy area in the very far distance over to the far right. So this is one method of placing pins. Unfortunately, we do only have 5 colored pins, which is I find really sad. I wish I had a lot more. I really like A Link Between Worlds, how there was a whole bunch of different colored pins that you could choose, and you could have them mean whatever you want. I just really liked that system. I thought it was great. So I wish that Breath of the Wild had a little bit more flexibility like that, although we do have the ability to place more specific pins that are all gold. I wish maybe those could be different colors too, because all those pins are gold colored, and I don't know. Anyways, so I'm going to be placing all kinds of permanent pins later. It's just the Great Plateau doesn't really have a lot of great farming locations. A lot of the good materials are going to be later in the game, so I will be using those here in a bit after we start unlocking more towers. Anyways, descend the tower if you like, and like I was saying before, going to the tower at all was entirely optional. It was just that tutorial to teach you how to place pins, so I'm actually going to warp back to the shrine where we just were and continue on from there. Alright, so now that we have the Magnesis Rune, we kind of done all of the required stuff for this particular video, so the rest of this video is just going to be me wandering around using the Magnesis Rune and getting some other goodies here on the Great Plateau for the last few minutes of this video. Otherwise, you can skip ahead to the next video where I'll continue on with the main quest to get the next rune. So regardless of whether you went to the tower or not, our next objective is just to go to all the various shrines. That's all we have to do here in the Great Plateau. However, there's a lot of goodies in each area, and I'll try and collect things in an efficient path. So, for example, now that we have Magnesis, we can grab all the goodies that are inside the nearby water. So do so. There are some valuable gems here in particular, which are pretty sweet. The other things are kind of optional. So grab the amber and the opal that are in the chests that are in the water. And then there's also some random crates here that are a little bit dilapidated. Kind of these, like, broken down metal boxes they'll break really easily, so you can actually smash them on purpose, and they always contain goodies. So in this case, some of these have arrows, and one of them has an apple, I believe. Anyways, go ahead and smash them on purpose. Just smack them into the ground by moving your controller up and down. This will allow you to break it to get the goodies that are inside. Next, we have a quick puzzle in which you can grab this plank here in the water, I guess is what you'd call it. So this metal plank, what you want to do is grab it with Magnesis and then bring it over to this little pool of tar, I guess is what it is. Anyways, we have a pool of tar, and you can't swim through it or anything. It will make you sink instantly if you do. However, there is some goodies you can get here. You want to bring this plank over to this little plateau, and then you want to place the plank across so that it's reaching the platform that is suspended above the tar. Now, the easiest way to do this is to throw the plank down on the ground and then re-magnesis it once you are positioned where it's in a straight line away from you. And that's the easiest way to place this thing. Otherwise, if you're at other angles, it could be kind of awkward to get it positioned just right. Anyways, get on top of this platform, and from here you can then open both the chests, one of which has 5 fire arrows, and the other one has 5 ice arrows. Both of these are very useful in specific situations, although we don't necessarily need them right now, but it is nice to get them so early game. Anyways, before you move on, there is also a metal rock that is connected to a chain that is connected to a nearby stump. You want to go ahead and use Magnesis on it and plop it down into the stump, and this will create a Korok. I'm going to be getting several of the Koroks here on the Great Plateau, both because they're easy as well as to kind of show some of the various Korok puzzles. Koroks, again, are totally optional. You don't have to get them, but I would recommend you get some. And there's another one that's nearby right here in between all these 2 giant rocks here. There's a single rock that's right underneath it. Pick it up to make another Korok appear. Again, pretty straightforward, but just something to know, like if you see metal objects when you're using Magnesis, or you see some kind of suspicious rocks like that, try and pick them up because they probably have something for you. So just so you know, even though I was talking about Koroks pretty in-depth right there, I'm not planning to do that for the entire walkthrough. I'm going to do that just like the first time for each Korok type. So each rock placement puzzle, each Magnesis puzzle like that. I'm going to talk about them super in-depth for that one. And then after that, I'm kind of just going to skip past it, unless it's a really complicated one. Any really hard Korok puzzles, I will stop and actually talk about it. But I'm planning to just basically fast forward through it, just be like, yeah, there's a Korok there. And I won't even talk about it super thoroughly because it's all kind of the same thing. Just so that you have a realistic expectation of what to anticipate for this walkthrough. The Great Plateau is introducing so many new mechanics, and I'm trying to go in depth talking about controls and stuff too, because little things like people that play video games all the time, they're used to having games where you can move and then you press in the left analog stick to either sprint or duck. And that's a pretty normal thing in the video game industry, but people who haven't played a lot of video games might not know that, for example. So that's part of the reason why I'm spending a lot of time talking about stuff like that. So that being said, here's an optional enemy encampment. Whenever you have skulls like this, you'll see a lot of these on the map throughout Hyrule, and these are enemy encampments that will reappear every blood moon, and they always have a skull chest which has goodies in it, and these particular chests will always reappear. And so you defeat all the enemies around it, you'll get the goodies inside. Now, to use the bow, which I haven't even had a chance to talk about this, even though I've been using the bow, you hold down R2 with your right middle finger, and this will allow you to start using your bow, and you can move it around and aim with either just tilting the controls, or the controller itself. You just move it around and its motion controls will work. And you can also disable the motion controls if you don't like that. You can also aim with the right analog stick. Also, by the way, if you get a headshot on enemies or hit them in the eye, depending on what type of enemy it is, then you'll get a guaranteed crit as well. And guaranteed crits will do, I think it's 2 times damage. It's either 2 or 3. I think it's 2 times. So the Traveler's Bow does 5 damage, so that would be 10 damage is what an arrow shot with the Traveler's Bow in the head would do. So the red Bokoblins don't have a lot of health. Something you can do is you can hit the lanterns that are in each eye of this particular skull, and it will drop the flaming lanterns on the enemies. The one on the right will actually land on top of some exploding barrels inside, and that will kill most of the Bokoblins in here, which is great. So at this point, I was curious, so I decided to try something really stupid, and it totally did not work out. You can shield surf on enemies to deal damage to them if you hit them just right. Or at least that's what I've seen anyways. I've seen people doing this on YouTube videos. I was like, you know what, I'm just going to try this real quick, which was a really bad idea for a couple different reasons. One is the fact that I'm just recording a video walkthrough. I shouldn't be doing this right now. This is not the right time to be messing around. I just thought it was kind of amusing that I was laughing as I was doing this. And secondly, because this enemy is not the one I should be doing that with. This is a blue Bokoblin, which has even more health and does more damage than red Bokoblins. It does 4 additional damage, but it also is wearing a spiked Boko Club, which does 12 damage. So it does 16 total damage every hit, or in other words, 4 hearts of damage. Which is bad. Now, granted, I do have I am wearing 4 armor from my equipment, so I guess actually I'm reducing it to 3 hearts of damage. Something you'll notice there, though, too. So it does 3 hearts of damage. I only have 3 hearts of damage, but it didn't kill me. And the reason for this is because there's this quality of life mechanic in Breath of the Wild where if enemies do even 1 more heart worth of damage than you have, it'll actually reduce you down to just a quarter heart. This is just to keep the game from feeling unfair is part of the idea with this, and you can actually abuse this mechanic quite thoroughly, and I do that throughout the walkthrough, and I'll explain more about what I mean by that later. Anyway, this killed me, and then I popped back up at my most recent autosave when the game saved a little bit ago. So I'm just outside of the enemy encampment itself. Now, notice, too, I didn't have time to talk about this before either, but when you're hitting the rope of the lantern, you do have to aim a little bit high to account for gravity, so the fall-off range of the arrows is something that will affect you. Also, by the way, you can also throw weapons, and you want to do this especially when they start breaking, because when they're like this, if you throw them, you can at least get a little bit more use out of them. Whenever you throw a weapon, you always do double damage. A lot of people think that it's just because the weapon's about to break. That's not true. It's actually just always going to do more damage when you throw it. I think it uses up double the durability compared to a regular attack, though. So, if you smack them regularly and versus throwing it always uses double the durability, I think, and it also does double damage. But anyways, if your weapon's about to break anyways, it's much more efficient to go ahead and do it then. Anyways, I went ahead and defeated the enemy. You'll notice, too, that he dropped his weapon after I did enough damage to him. And so I ran over and quickly picked up the spiked Boko Club and then used it to defeat him as well. And then after he was defeated, I also saw a flaming Boko Club, and what I did is I just dropped one of my other weapons. Rusty weapons tend to break. They have very low durability, so I threw down a rusty weapon even though it had more total damage to pick up a Boko Club instead. Honestly, early on, it's up to you to decide what you want to do. Sometimes it's nice having some, even if they have low durability, having some weapons that do a lot of damage, especially if you use them for doing things that give you guaranteed crits, like throwing them, or using a sneak strike, for example. Those are all some good tactics to use for that. Alright, well, seeing as I have like 2 hours of Great Plateau to cover and this video is already pretty long, I think this is a good stopping point. If you enjoyed this and found it helpful, be sure to throw a like on it, subscribe, and stay tuned for more content just like this. And if you really like it, consider supporting me on Patreon, because all that really does help to make all this possible. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, you have an amazing day, and I'll see you next time.